Sunny day in the forest, silence. Some strange sounds began to be heard. It was a boy. He was sitting on a log in the forest and trying to cut something out of a tree with a knife. We will tell you more about it. The boy is only 10 years old, and in his hands he's not just holding a knife. This tool was given to him by his father when the boy was younger. The father taught his son not only courage, but also how to work with wood correctly, using a tool, because he himself was a sculptor. Over the course of 10 years, the boy developed himself as a talented sculptor. And finally, today he finished working on his father's sculpture. A real masterpiece. The boy remembers how his father was lying in a hospital bed, and he stood next to him in a medical mask. The father lay dying and gave wise instructions to his only son. Instructions about how cruel this world is, and that you need to be extremely careful. The father asked his son not to trust anyone except the master from the Kang family. But the master from the Kang family has been dead for 3 days. It was a deadly pandemic that affected all the villagers. It turned out that the boy and his sculptor father were the last survivors from this village. They settled in the mountains, but the father did not know about a death master. He thought that the master from the Kang family was still alive, and the boy didn't want to upset his father, so he didn't tell him about it. He simply nodded silently and agreed. Before his death, the father told his son that he was very proud of him and how important it is to be a kind and happy person. And then the memories disappeared like smoke. A tear fell on the father's sculpture. The boy wiped it, remembering his father's smile, how beautiful it was. After which he picked up the sculpture and thought that if he was happy, then his father would be happy too. The boy began to feel an unfamiliar emptiness and thought about his father. Wouldn't he be lonely if he left his sculpture just like that? After thinking about this, he immediately went away for a while. Soon he returned, but not himself. He brought a sculpture of his mother. This sculpture did not take much time, because the boy has very nimble hands. He barely remembers his mother, but he knows for sure that she was beautiful. She died when he was 5 years old. The sculptures of his parents were finally finished. Suddenly a voice was heard from somewhere. The boy thought he heard someone ask him about the graves and whether he had made them himself. Not far away, the silhouette of an old man appeared approaching him. This is how the boy first met his cursed master. His father warned him not to trust strangers. But what about this old man? The old man repeated his question again. The boy thought that if the old man turned out to be adequate, then he would be polite to him. And finally, he proudly and smugly answered yes to the old man's question. The old man asked another question. He asked about the sculptures. Did the boy make them too? The boy was glad that some stranger was interested in his work. The old man's question received the same enthusiastic answer. Yes! Surprise and some kind of interest arose in the old man's gaze, after which he began to think. And the boy in turn thought too. I thought that maybe the old man also wants a sculpture for his grave. Judging by his age, he will need it soon. Suddenly the old man invited the boy to go with him. The boy was surprised, thinking why he needed him and why. The old man grinned and replied that if he went with him, he would teach the boy the best martial arts techniques. The boy thought that this was some kind of rofl, and in general, why trust some unfamiliar old man? The old man smiled again and told him to look at him carefully. Something interesting is about to happen. The old man immediately raised his left hand, waved it, and suddenly the rustling of leaves on the trees was heard. The boy felt a strong wind, like a hurricane. The leaves on the trees rustled even more, and suddenly the trees fell to the ground. The boy stood in bewilderment. He couldn't believe his eyes. How could this old man have such a powerful technique? The old man, still smiling, asked the boy if he now, after everything he had seen, wanted to go with him and study. But this old man had such a powerful and destructive technique. In any case, the boy still had nowhere to go because he had no one else left. It was at this moment that the boy made his final decision. He decided that he would take all possible benefit from this life. The boy accepted the old man's offer. It might have been a stupid decision, but it gave him a new chance. The beginning of his bloody fate was laid. Boy believed the old man like he just met him. But later it seemed to him that he just wanted to humiliate boy and destroy his future. __. Somewhere in the mountains. As soon as they arrived at the old man's shack, the boy immediately understood everything. The housing was so old and unsuitable. The boy thought it was all a prank because how did it happen that such a powerful master lives in such a wretched place? On the other hand, the boy still doesn't know all the power of the old man, but the way the old man shook the trees in the forest and knocked them to the ground, it was something. The old man still has the same grin on his face, and a look in which the question, "Is something wrong?" is read. Finally, the boy understood everything. After all, everyone knows those stories about strange masters who live in a god-forsaken place and teach ordinary people various military techniques. The boy decided to discard this thought, because he is still a child, and he does not need to think about such things. especially since this old man clearly has something to learn. The boy finally asked the old man what he would teach him today. The old man, with a grin, asked a counter-question to the boy about whether he was ready to study. A day later, a boy and an old man stand in front of a pot filled with rice and filled with water. The old man asked to watch what he was about to show him. He began to rinse the rice in water and explain how rice grains in water are fragile and can easily break, despite the fact that the rice itself is hard. He also drew attention to how important it is to use your strong fingers, but to do it slowly and extremely carefully. And he added that you need to wash the rice at least 3 times. Further, the old man said that there is also such an important point as the density of the pot. As it turns out, this also affects the taste of the rice, so you need to cover the pot with a lid. After which he shared how you can experience the beauty of rice if you live in the mountains. To do this, you just need to take a stone from the top of the mountain and place it on the lid. This is his secret technique. The boy said that he understood everything. Another day later, this time the old man decided to tell the boy about cooking techniques in general. He told him about a technique called flying cooking. This technique is used for vegetables, meat, tofu, etc. For quick cooking, all components of the dish need to be thrown into boiling oil. The dish will be ready as soon as all the ingredients are one, forming a single taste and aroma. While the old man was cutting tomatoes on the board, he began to talk about making soup. He said that soup ingredients must be handled with extreme care when adding them to the broth so that they do not remain hard. He emphasized that feelings are the most important aspect of cooking any dish. After all, a good dish turns out only when a person prepares it with sincerity. The boy, in bewilderment, asked the old man if he was a cook. And why should he learn to cook? To become a better chef? The old man pathetically answered the boy that he did not understand anything because what he was teaching him now was hail of lightning. Call of lightning is a technique that requires very dexterous hands, and you also need to understand the essence of this technique in order to master it. Cooking teaches you to be skillful and helps you understand that fighting techniques and cooking techniques are very similar and go well together. The boy doubted a little because it all sounded dubious, but the name of the technique is very cool, so we need to cast aside doubts, he thought. The old man handed the boy a kitchen cleaver and told him to try to cook something. Remembering this moment in the future, the boy realized that perhaps this was the only moment and chance to forget about everything and leave the old man. The boy began to fry the ingredients in oil, but his dish began to burn. The old man immediately hit the boy on the head with his smoking pipe. The boy continued to work. A month has passed. The boy sets the table and there are already several different dishes on it. The master noted in a satisfied tone that finally the table was set well, and he immediately began the meal. The dissatisfied boy hit the table with his fist and was indignant. Why is it only he who cooks food in this damn hut? Isn't the old man ashamed that he does nothing while his student cooks and sets the table? Maybe the old man would feel a surge of strength if he did something. The old man's face changed from satisfied to menacing and then a blow. Yes, today the master showed his true face in all its glory. In fact, a firm hand can really set the mind straight. On this day, the boy felt how strong the master's hand was. Silence. Mountains. A boy's cry is heard from the old man's hut. Now the boy understood that he needed to be polite to the old man. This incident influenced him later. The old man was already tired of cooking techniques, so he ordered the boy to chop wood. And the boy still could not come to his senses after that blow, thinking about how this old horseradish allowed himself to offend the boy. Then the boy looked at the deck and saw that there wasn't even an axe on it. But he didn't immediately clarify this question with the old man, because he was afraid of another blow in his direction. But still, the boy gathered his courage and decided to ask the old man where the axe was. How could he chop wood without it? The master was surprised that the boy could still speak and said that the boy did not need the axe, because he had not yet come to his senses after that blow. The boy showed impudence and asked what could then be used to split wood. Is it really the fists that an old man uses to beat little boys? The old man harshly told him to close his mouth and watch what the master was doing. Otherwise the boy will get hit on the head again. The master took out a small knife from under his robe, threw it slightly. The knife spun around the axis of its handle 3 times, and again ended up in the old man's hand. The boy stood stunned. The old man temptingly asked if he was surprised. The boy immediately thought that it seemed like an ordinary knife, but why did the old man even look so cool with it in his hands? The old man sat down on the grass next to the log on which the log stood, and the boy also sat down next to him. The master drew the boy's attention to his brush and told him to observe. A slight stroke of the brush up, then down, a moment, and the log split into 2 equal parts. The boy sat dumbfounded. Shock content. The old man with a grin on his face noted that there was nothing difficult about it and now the boy could try it himself. The boy asked in a surprised tone if the master was sure that he was really able to repeat after him. The master, repeatedly demonstrating the dexterity of his hand, said that it was not a matter of strength, but of speed. The point is to find the right moment to bend the wrist. The boy picked up the knife with the thought that he should at least try and see what happens. Thinking about speed and momentum, he swung his brush and hit the log with his knife. And in the end, only a small piece of the log broke off. The old man said in a surprised tone that if the boy is not capable of even such simple things, then everything is lost. But still, the master added that you can use not only the hand, but also the elbow along with it, and the movement should be along a trajectory in the form of a semicircle. The boy tried again. A slightly larger piece broke off, but still insignificantly small. The master, mockingly, said that he was surprised that the boy could not do anything, even using his elbow and hand at the same time. Then he added that you can also use your shoulder along with your elbow and hand at the same time. The boy hit the log with the knife again. This time the log simply flew to the side and fell on the grass without splitting. The master said dissatisfiedly that the speed was not enough, and there was no need to use force. You only need to use a brush. But the effort is still not enough. The boy became upset and indignant at why the master was forcing his student to do something impossible, considering that the student was still inexperienced. But the boy could not say this out loud, fearing another blow from the old man in his direction. But still, he reminded the master that he was a 10-year-old boy, and his body was young and fragile. At the same time, the boy still tried to be polite and think before saying something, so as not to get another blow. Still, he said that he needed something larger to chop wood because he really can't do this with a small knife. The master thought out loud. Really? He said that if all the boy wanted was something big and strong, then he could give him something. The old man immediately rushed into the barn, and the sounds of rattling trash began to be heard from there. The old man shouted with delight, "Here it is!" and returned with a large, shiny axe, which had a long wooden handle. The old man told the boy that at first he could use this tool to chop wood. The old man immediately rushed into the barn, and the sounds of rattling trash began to be heard from there. Shouted with delight, "Here it is!" and returned with a large, shiny axe, which had a long wooden handle. The old man told the boy that at first he could use this tool to chop wood. Now it will be much easier for the boy to chop wood because the master has found an axe. But doing this with a knife is unrealistic. Immediately, the boy started thinking about why the hell the master didn't give him an axe right away, and instead gave him some kind of fucking knife. The old man asked why the boy was staring at him so strangely. The boy did not show it and did not voice his thoughts because he was afraid that the master would punish him again. In general, the old man held out the axe, holding it with only 2 fingers. The boy put out both hands to take it. As soon as he touched the instrument, some unknown force pulled him down. A moment later, the boy fell and found himself on the ground on his knees, and the axe pinned his hands to the ground. The boy screamed. His shoulder hurt. The boy began to be indignant at how this could be, why the axe was so heavy. Because of its heaviness, he almost dislocated his shoulder. The master looked at him contemptuously and said that this was all nonsense because the axe weighs only some 70 gin. The boy was perplexed by how the old man could think that he could lift an axe that weighs more than the boy himself. Immediately, the boy began to reason and calculate the weight of the instrument out loud. 60 GAN equals sine 1120 Ryan, which in turn equals 1200 dong, which equals 112,000 puna, which makes 1,120,000 ri. He asked in surprise how anyone could believe that a 10-year-old boy would lift this axe. After all, the boy has such a young and fragile body. The master angrily declared that the boy should have calmed down his laziness at least a little, because you can learn everything in this world if you add a little effort. He also added that even a boy can lift an axe. To do this, you need to be at least a little purposeful. After which the old man noticed that the boy's clothes were dirty and said that it was time to learn how to wash his clothes. After that, he was even a little glad that finally he would no longer have to do this boring work. He ordered the boy to follow him. They came to a river near a waterfall. The master ordered the boy to wash things here, and he added that there is a pleasant environment here, so the boy will be able to put in order not only his things, but also his brain and body. The boy modestly expressed his dissatisfaction. He said that he agreed, despite the fact that the river is already 30 minutes from the shack. And he added that despite the winter season, it's still quite warm here. Immediately, the boy saw a basket and a pile of dirty, smelly clothes. Will he really have to wash all this with his childish hands? He took one of the things from the basket, held it out in front of him, and covered his nose with his hand, and said that this thing had been lying there for a year already. And he dared to ask the master how long he had not washed his things. The master looked with a dominant gaze and asked, "Is something wrong?" The boy immediately calmed down and answered with some doubt that everything was fine. and the only thing was that there were a lot of clothes. But since he was a student, he would help the old man. The master immediately took out some strange instrument and told the boy to take it in his hands. He explained that it was a clothes-washing spatula and could be used to make washing clothes easier, after which he politely asked the boy to speed up and threw this instrument directly into the hands of his student. Immediately, the boy experienced déjà vu, some similar feeling. Not even a second had passed before the student fell to his knees under the pressure of a heavy instrument. He screamed. His arm hurt. He again became indignant at how the instrument could be so heavy. And why didn't the old man warn him again? Asked in a surprised tone what this means. This shovel can't be so heavy because it only weighs 50 geins, and this will already be lighter than that axe. By this point, the weight of the shovel had sunk about half into the ground. The boy, seeing this, was indignant. What does a light instrument mean? If this were so, he would not have entered the ground so deeply. The boy, in a panic, again began to perform some mathematical calculations out loud. It turned out that this weight is equal to 800,000 Rri, which is also a lot. That axe was so heavy, and now this... Was he really going to have to work with this heavy tool? The student noticed that with this tool it is hardly possible to wash clothes, except perhaps tear them. The dissatisfied master reminded the boy to overcome his laziness again, and pay attention to the fact that clothes can really be torn. So he needs to master another special technique. The old man told about a technique called Yu. Its essence is that even in strength you can feel tenderness, so you can wash things correctly, and this will also help strengthen the student's shoulder and wrist. The master also said that this technique is called the secret of washing, and it was passed down from generation to generation. He asked the boy if everything was clear to him. The boy had everything flash before his eyes. He did not have time to understand anything. He didn't even realize that the master was saying something important. The old man waved his hand and said that you just need to learn this technique. Then he turned around and began to leave. The student shouted to the master and asked what kind of technique this was. The master replied that he had just explained everything to him, and that he just needed to try to remember what was said. The boy, furious, shouted at the old man again and told him to explain the Yu technique to him before leaving. The old man only added that things needed to be washed before sunset, after which it would also be necessary to chop wood and cook food. The boy is angry because the old man taught him nothing, and now he demands something else. How can he wash these things? Somewhere in the distance, the voice of an old man was heard. He said he would hit the boy again if he did not do as he was ordered. The student immediately calmed down. The sky above the river was bright orange and the sounds of crows could be heard. The old man sat on a bench, lying on his side and sipping his drink. The master shouted at the student, why was he using the washing tool incorrectly? Meanwhile, the student was pulling a shovel along the ground, which was tied with a rope to his shoulders, and the old man warned him that the tool could be damaged. The boy thought that he would rather harm himself than this blade. Next, the boy took the basket with things with both hands and raised it above his head, after which he began to carry all the things to the river. And then, the boy could not stand it and fell. There was a crash of baskets with things falling to the ground. The boy pitifully asked the master why he was treating him like that. Immediately, he saw the master standing in front of him, who, again not sparing his student, said that he was crying like a little boy who spilled milk. The master easily lifted the heavy shovel with one hand and checked whether it was damaged. And then he added that the instrument is not heavy at all. The boy continued to lie on the ground, and the master said that he would now check what his student had done during all this time. The old man continued to talk, listing the boy's next duties, such as chopping wood and cooking. And then, the old man was so numb that he dropped his shovel from his hands and it ended up in the ground again. He turned to his student again. He took him by the scruff of the neck and menacingly asked where all the things had gone, because all that was left were rags. Holding the boy, the old man repeated his question. The boy nevertheless answered that no matter how much effort he made, it was still impossible to use the tool. That's why the clothes tore. As a result, the student began to blame the master for everything, saying that he did not even teach him this incomprehensible Yu technique. What can we say about this damn heavy laundry paddle? The master, still holding the boy, became angry and asked affirmatively whether the student really wanted to reproach him for the fact that it was the master's fault. The boy calmed down, remembering that same blow in his direction, and thought that it was better not to anger the old man. The student began to dodge, saying some nonsense in order to change the topic. He said that the master must avoid sin, but not the sinner, so you can put all the blame on that very washing tool. It probably needs to be thrown away or buried somewhere. The old man laughed and said that he still had much to teach his student. In the future, the boy will understand that he obeyed his master unquestioningly, only because the little boy cannot withstand the punishments of this old man. But still, the boy assured himself that this was an integral part of his education. This was followed by daily training. Evening, hand sensitivity training. On the table in front of the boy lay a piece of torn clothing, and next to it stood a basket with balls of woolen thread and a pair of scissors. All this was illuminated by a candle, which was on a special stand that stood on the same table. After regular and lengthy explanations, the master asked the student if he understood everything, after which he confirmed that he could start. And he added that he should also not forget to use knacks, single stitches, cross-stitch, seams, chain stitch, and other methods that he taught him. The boy needed to sew up all the clothes he had ruined. The master also explained to his student that sewing his clothes was very beneficial, as it would directly affect the sensitivity of his hands. A boy trying to sew up torn clothes accidentally stuck a needle into the thumb of his left hand with an awkward movement of his hand. There was a scream. Early in the morning, lower body workout in nature. The student was hung with 3 buckets, one of which was tied to his head and stood on it, and the other 2 buckets hung on a yoke attached to the boy's back. With this load, the boy had to run across the river, jumping over obstacles while the water had to remain in the buckets. Morning of the same day. First training of my senses and speed. The boy was preparing the dish by frying the ingredients in a frying pan. Later that morning, upper body workout. The boy was cleaning the hut, sweeping and washing the floors, wiping dust off objects. This was followed by a second training of senses and speed. After lunch that day, first strength and skill training. The boy still tried to master the washing tool, but again he tore his clothes with that damn spatula. Later that day, second strength and mastery training. The boy tried again to chop wood with the same heavy axe. He, barely holding the axe in his hands, placed it with its sharp blade on a log, after which he let the tool out of his hands. The log split under the pressure of the axe. Before sunset, third training of senses and speed. The boy was still cooking hard. In the evening, another hand sensitivity training followed. The boy pricked his finger with the needle again. Similar training took place day after day. A week has passed. A tired student lies on the floor of an old man's hut. The old man sarcastically asked the question, "Is it really not as easy as it might seem?" Nevertheless, the master decided to give some advice to his student in order to simplify his training. He explained that there is a technique called the Way of the Lightning Spirit, and it can really simplify life. But to master it, you need to master your inner strength. While smoking a pipe, the old man spoke about another technique called the Path of the Condemned Spirit. Both of these techniques are spiritic, spiritual. But first, you need to understand something in order to understand this. Namely, that a thunderstorm is formed in the sky for a reason. The fact is that there is yin and yang energy. It is formed from mountains, rivers, and oceans. This energy creates thunderclouds. When a small share of yin mixes with a large share of yang, a thunderstorm appears. Meanwhile, the student sat in a meditation pose with his eyes closed and tried to understand the words of the master, and the master continued to share his wisdom. It turns out that with the help of the Path of the Lightning Spirit technique, you can summon the spirit of lightning using your inner strength. The human body can absorb energy that is around it. A person does not even notice how this energy hovers around and affects his body. It turns out that breathing should not end in humans. It should also accumulate and disperse. This way you can control your energy. Energy can be subdued through willpower, physical strength, and the mind. The master, still smoking his pipe, continued to explain what had been said. In fact, many people live their lives without knowing how to breathe correctly, although they instinctively know how to do it. The master decided to tell the boy an instructive story about a madman spraying gas. He sprayed this gas on ordinary people who did not know how to breathe properly. They instinctively closed their nostrils after spraying the gas on them. This was a categorically wrong decision, which is why they died. The trick is that, not knowing how to breathe correctly, a person inhales poison. But you can learn the skill of the Path of the Lightning Spirit and learn inner strength. The human body would then be able to absorb the essence of lightning and provide it with unimaginable power that could destroy mountains and oceans. According to tradition, the master, as always, asked his student if he understood everything that was said. After all, this is all important. The boy, continuing to sit in a meditation position, thought that the story was really good, but still almost nothing was clear. Maybe you really need to work harder to understand something. The student asked the master what he needed to do. The master asked the boy in surprise what he meant, and repeated that you just need to absorb energy, collecting and dispersing it, using willpower, physical strength, and mind. He also added that for this you need to use your breathing correctly, using Qigong to open your meridians. As you know, a person has only 12 meridians. Only after opening each of them can the energy be properly controlled. You need to learn a considerable number of human arteries and veins. The old man said that he will explain the essence only once, so this time you need to listen more carefully. And if suddenly the student asks something again, he will punish him again. And then the boy could not stand it and became indignant. He asked how you can remember everything the first time without even writing it down. The old man calmed the boy down with another hit of the pipe on the head and added that the student should no longer raise his voice at his master. After which the master said that if it is really difficult for a boy to remember everything the first time, he can keep notes. In general, the master again continued to talk about technology. He said that the way of the condemned spirit technique can help the student remember everything the first time. The boy doubted. Could this technique really help him? How will she turn him into a geek? The master continued his speech. After all, the boy still did not understand what kind of technique this was. He said that the essence of controlling anything is to control yourself not only physically, but also to be able to control your mind and heart. Then he began to say some philosophical thoughts about how the path of the condemned spirit can twist a person's head like a thread. One must use one's mental potential. The spiritual thread is similar to the ozir, because it is pure, calm, transparent, and indestructible. The human body will be forever changed by achieving it. The student expressed his doubts out loud because it all sounds somehow strange, and then he received a fist on the head from his master. The master added that it would be nice, after all, to focus if the student really wants to be the best. To move on, it is necessary to master the spiritual technique. The student asked the master how to learn this technique, and then he listed his assumptions. Concentration training. Do you need to learn a lot of things? The old man noted that there are people like him who disagree with him. Some people would hate his teaching methods. The master added that to master the technique, his student will train in nature, strictly adhere to a certain diet, and will also be trained in other methods. In the end, the old man finished off the boy by telling him that the technique was developed by generations of the Lightning Clan. It was created through blood, sweat, and tears. The boy had a bad feeling. The boy asked the old man how he could learn this complex technique. The old man noted that there are people like him who disagree with him. Some would hate his teaching methods. The master added that to master the technique, his student will train in nature, strictly adhere to a certain diet, and will also be trained in other methods. In the end, the old man finished off the boy by telling him that the technique was developed by generations of the Lightning Clan. It was created through blood, sweat, and tears. The boy had a bad feeling. A little while later, the forest offered a picturesque view of the mountains. Body workout 1. Outdoor workout. The boy walks through the forest and picks mushrooms. He looks very tired. He remembers the master's instructions about the need to be concentrated. This method is suitable for outdoor training. The training lasts 1 hour a day. You need to collect mushrooms, fruits, and all sorts of useful herbs in the mountains in order to develop sensitivity, as well as to be aware of what is in the mountains. And then, walking through the forest, the boy saw that a snake had crawled out from behind the grass. And he remembered how the master had mentioned that all sorts of animals live in the mountains. So there you can also learn concentration, reaction, and speed. The boy rushed as fast as he could, running away from the snake and thinking that his master was a sadist. The boy also remembered that the place is called Hunyup Bong. People who collected all kinds of herbs here and encountered various animals painted the bushes to mark this place. Suddenly some kind of animal came out, crushing the snake with its paw, which was hissing at the boy. It was a huge bear. The master said that no one comes here anymore due to the fact that this place was marked. Due to this, the place became quieter and calmer. When the boy gets there, he clearly needs to be quiet and careful. The bear immediately stood up on its hind legs, and the boy began to run away even faster. Then, out of nowhere, a hand appeared with a small knife. A couple of deft movements, and the bear, already dead, lies on the ground. It was the master. He took the bear's carcass and dragged it behind him. Body workout 2. Strict diet. The boy finally returned home from the mountains. He was very tired. On top of that, he was almost bitten by a snake and almost eaten by a bear. By this time, the old man was already standing at the stove and cooking something. The boy asked what it was. The old man asked in surprise, "How is that?" And he immediately replied that the bear soup was ready. He added that since the student was an hour late, the master had to prepare lunch himself. The boy was surprised. "What kind of bear soup is this?" The master replied that the name was such because the soup was made from bear, and he added that there is no need to find fault with his words. The student, in turn, nevertheless gave up on the strange name and agreed with the master. As soon as they sat down at the table, the boy noticed that the old man had much more food than his student, and he asked why this was so. The master explained that proper nutrition is important, since the soul and body should not be overloaded during training. He also noted that he would eat fatty foods instead of the boy, and the boy should only eat healthy and tasty grass. Then he added that all this was just for the sake of caring for his student, nothing more, and that soon the student himself would understand this. The boy was angry, broke his chopsticks, and shouted that he could stop fooling him, because the boy could eat fish and meat too. Immediately the boy thought that if this continued, he would not live long. Not even a moment had passed before the master asked why the boy wasn't eating. The boy looked at the old man's plates and they were already empty, as if blown by the wind. He became even more indignant. The old man grinned and said that while the boy was indignant, he decided to finish his food as quickly as possible. And in general, why bother getting to the bottom of some little things? After which, he said that it was time to train again, so the student should quickly finish his food. And he added that the one who finished eating last will have to wash all the dishes. The student immediately realized that even if he had managed to finish eating before the old man, nothing would have changed. That old bastard would have made him wash all the dishes anyway. Body workout 3. Practice? The old man proudly presented his student with a sculpture carved from wood. He asked to say hello to her and said that with her help, many generations had learned military techniques. It was a statue in the form of a boy, and on his belt hung a rag simulating underwear. The master added that this statue can be called a wooden martyr. The student was again indignant and asked if this was a joke. The indignant master again asked a provocative question in response. Is there something wrong? The boy said that this statue irritates him greatly. Besides the fact that she doesn't look very good, she's also wearing some kind of rag in the form of underwear. The old man explained that since the statue is needed to study human points, it exactly replicates the human body. Is it really necessary to remove this rag from her? The boy agreed that a rag was still needed. The master continued to explain. In order to learn acupuncture, you need to study 12 meridians and 8 points of the human body. Today they will study exactly the 12 meridians. The master asked the student to remember everything that he would now show him. The old man will use a needle to point at the required points on the statue, and the student will need to repeat all this. The old man temptingly asked the student if he could do it, and the boy was only glad that he was finally learning real military equipment and not some useless training. He smugly answered the master that there are only 12 meridians, and not every child will be able to remember them. But since he is a geek, it will not be difficult for him to learn it. The master said temptingly, "Really?" He also warned him that if he did not remember, the old man would personally punish him. The boy doubted that he had fallen into some kind of trap. The master asked the student to remember everything that he would now show him. The old man will use a needle to point at the required points on the statue, and the student will need to repeat all this. The old man temptingly asked the student if he could do it, and the boy was only glad that he was finally learning real military equipment, and not some useless training. He smugly answered the master that there are only 12 meridians, and not every child will be able to remember them. But since he is a geek, it will not be difficult for him to learn it. The master said temptingly, "Really?" He also warned him that the more serious the mistake, the harsher the punishment. The boy began to doubt, as if he had completely gotten himself into trouble. Or was it just doubts? The master immediately took the needle and began to show all the meridians on the statue. All human meridians are in accordance with the energy circulation channels of the internal organs. Also, depending on the parts of the body, they are divided into yin and yang. The meridians located on the outside of the arms and legs are called yang, and those on the inside are called yin. At the same time, the meridians of the arms are called sugen, and the meridians of the legs are called joken. Moreover, the meridians can also be divided into 4 more groups. Suzamingen, which are on the inside of the arms, Suzamingen, on the outside of the arms, Joxamingen, on the inside of the legs, and, finally, Joxamingen, on the outside of the legs. And each of these groups includes other meridians. For example, the yin-hand meridians consist of the lung meridian, the pericardial meridian, and also the central one, which relates to the heart. And the hand and yang meridians are from the meridians of the large colon, 3 bursae, and small intestine. The meridians on the legs are yin, from the meridians of the spleen, liver, and kidney. In general, the 12 paired meridians can be classified as lung, colon, stomach, spleen, heart, small intestine, bladder, kidney, pericardium, 3 bursa, gallbladder, liver meridians. And the latter unites with the lung meridian, forming a vicious circle. Qi circulates in the human body with the help of the lung meridians. To put it simply, the yin-hand meridians function from the chest to the fingers. The yang-hand meridians function from the fingers to the head. The yang-foot meridians function from the head to the toes. And the yin-foot meridians function from the toes to the chest. This is a closed circuit. The master visually drew an imaginary circle in the air and, as always, asked his student if he understood everything. The confused student was indignant that there were too many terms that he had never even heard of before. How to remember all this the first time? Besides, the master spoke everything so quickly, like Eminem standing in front of a microphone. The old man reproached the boy by reminding him how he boasted that he was a geek and would remember everything. But still he encouraged him, saying that he should at least try. The angry boy screamed and told the master to just show him who needed to be beaten. The master pointed his finger towards the sculpture and said that first the boy could try his hand at it. The master also told him that it was necessary to act from the lung meridian all the way to the bladder. but for every wrong action he would punish the boy, delivering 1 blow per mistake. The master handed the needle to his student, and the boy became worried because he didn't remember anything, and now he would most likely get it from the old man. The boy began to remember how he crammed books when he was 5 years old. For example, a book about 1,000 hieroglyphs, and also 4 volumes about 3 phenomena. In general, he needs to repeat the same thing that the old man showed, so he began to reason and act. From the chest comes the respiratory meridian, after which the pericardial meridian, and then the central one, which comes from the heart. In the abdominal cavity, there is the meridian of the large intestine, and then there are the meridians of the 3 bags, then the meridian of the small intestine, which also follows the meridian of the spleen. Next is the liver meridian, then the kidney meridian, and from the stomach is the next one. And finally, the gallbladder meridian, and then the bladder. At the end, the boy asked if he was doing everything right. He shouldn't have made a mistake. The surprised old man praised himself, noting that he was still a good teacher, despite the fact that his students still had a lot to learn. But there was still a chance. The boy was not satisfied with this answer. He began to be indignant that the old man answered so calmly, because the student noticed that the master was still surprised. So why then can't you just praise your student? The master noted that the only surprise was that the student made many incorrect movements, despite the fact that it seemed to the student that he was doing everything right. Immediately, the old man decided to check the boy again and asked him to show himself the lung meridian. The surprised boy ran his finger from the inside of his left arm to his chest, after which he doubtfully asked if he showed everything correctly. The master immediately threatened his student with punishment, adding that in fact the meridian is more than 12, and 1 lung meridian consists of 11 channels of both arms. After which he began to list some points of influence, showing them on the boy: Junbu, Umun, Chenbu, Hyobek, Chektek, Gonchue, Yonggel, Gengo, Taeyong, Oj, and Sosen. And then he asked the boy how he was feeling. The boy had a pleasant feeling, and he said that recently his back, shoulder, and heartburn had been hurting. But now, the satisfied master said that judging by the expression on the boy's face, he liked it. Therefore, it is necessary for the student to remember these points on his body. This is called the lung meridian. The student was indignant. Why couldn't it be shown all the points on it at once? And this is not to mention the fact that the first practical lesson took place just 2 months after the start of his training. The old man asked with a grin if he was sure that he needed to show all the points on the boy's body. The student immediately calmed down and backed up. He said that he had probably gone too far with his desires, and that this pace of teaching was not so bad after all. He said that because he had a bad feeling. The master noted that the boy, after all, is not as stupid as it might seem at first glance, and he continued to argue that when studying blood circulation, it is undesirable to show dangerous points on a person, since some points can paralyze or even lead to death. But since the boy is so talkative, the master can show him the points of influence on the tongue. The boy asked to continue his studies, showing the dots only on the sculpture, and the master reminded that for every mistake there is a punishment. The old man began to count on his fingers how many dots he showed on the doll. It turned out 309 on each side, a total of 618 dots. But the student was able to correctly show only 43 dots on each side, which equals 86 dots. It turns out that the master must hit his student 532 times. The boy, hiding behind the sculpture, said that the master was probably mistaken, because the meridian is only 12. The master laughed, adding that this is called teaching the structure of the body. He said that he could show the remaining points by hitting his student's body so that he would remember them. The frightened boy began to run away, fearing for his life. The old man shouted after him. The next day they trained again. The master showed the student the points on the sculpture, and he tried to repeat after him. For every mistake, of course, there was a punishment. And so on until the onset of spring. 4 months have passed. 4 months have passed. The student was sitting on the grass in a meditation position, with his hands slightly closer together. Some kind of bluish and bright clot of energy began to form in his hands, which he could control. And then the master asked why his student had not yet finished what he was ordered. After all, the young student still has to cook, wash and chop wood, and then clean up. The surprised student asked how it was possible not to notice everything that had already been done, and he pointed to the table laden with food, to the pile of firewood that lay by the stove, to the things that were already drying outside after washing, and finally, to how the old man's apartment shone after cleaning. After which the boy clarified that if this is all that needed to be done for today, then he will go to study 2 techniques called Naren Simbab and Yongsa Gyol, since these techniques do not require physical activity, and after them, you are not so tired. The master reproached his student for boasting that he knew everything, although he had only learned the basics. And he added that the boy looked more like an old man's housekeeper than a master's apprentice. After which the master said that there was no hurry, and more serious training would be required to study combat techniques. The boy answered doubtfully, as if the old man was deceiving him. The old man said that if he is so confident in himself, then he can still try to learn something new. He pointed his finger towards a shelf on which lay an interesting wooden instrument with strings, reminiscent of a guitar, but without the lower part. And below, on a special stand, lay another similar instrument, but it looked more serious and prestigious than the one that was lying on the shelf. It was dark in color, and on top were bright red silk threads woven into an interestingly shaped mass. The master explained that the instrument was called the Smashing Thunder Sword, and playing it is reminiscent of playing the guitar. Playing the gyagium, which is lying on the shelf, requires difficult finger movement techniques and very strong concentration. And not everyone can play the nagima, which lies on a stand. In addition to special equipment, one more thing is needed, thanks to which the boy will be able to play this sword of smashing thunder in the future. Mastering this instrument is about half of all training. The student was surprised that earlier, the master did not even allow the boy to touch this instrument even while cleaning, but now he will teach him to play it. Immediately, the boy began to have fantasies about how he was sitting on the mountainside in the dark evenings, and all sorts of strangers were admiring him and discussing from behind his back how good he was. The boy imagined himself in the future as the youngest and cutest master and how wonderfully he played the instrument. After the student returned to reality from his fantasies, he joyfully and pathetically told the master that all this was wonderful, since a fighter should be able not only to wield his sword, but also to play the instrument perfectly. The master, putting the boy in his place, replied that he had come up with all sorts of ideas and was not talking about learning a musical instrument at all. The student asked what all this meant. The old man explained that the nagim was invaluable to the school, and it would be an honor for the boy to learn to play it. But before that, you will need to master kyagium. The boy continued to stand and admire the nagim, without taking his eyes off him. Immediately, the boy decided to find out what this wonderful instrument sounds like. As soon as he extended his finger to the string, he immediately received a cut and blood began to flow from his finger. The master scolded the boy in an instructive tone, after which he began to bandage the student's wounded finger, adding that he did not lose his finger only with God's help. And in general, why touch everything without asking? Next, the master carefully wiped the bloody string with a rag, saying that the string was made of a special thread that could control thunder. And he added that the thread cuts everything that touches it, and in order to avoid cutting yourself, you need to learn a special technique. The boy was indignant that since the master said that he would teach him to play this instrument, then it was possible to touch this instrument. In addition to this, the master did not warn the student how sharp this thread is, and in general, how then can one learn to play such an instrument if it can cause him to lose all his fingers? The master took the instrument in his hands, called the boy a name, sat in a meditation position, still holding the instrument in his hands, and said that he would now show the boy a master class on this dangerous instrument. The old man began to play it and asked his student to listen carefully to the melody. The boy was dissatisfied with the old man's insults towards him, and therefore he threatened the master that when he gets old and he no longer has the strength to punish his student, then the student will laugh at the master and not vice versa. And then, hearing the melody, the boy was surprised at how the master could play the instrument. The sky seemed to become even brighter, and the flowers bloomed even more. The animals in the forest burst into tears because the melody touched them. After which the master grinned and noted that the boy had some kind of ridiculous expression on his face, insulting him again. And then he asked whether his student liked how the great master played the nagima. The old man explained that this was the power of bunresu. This is a technique that allows you to control thunder with your own hands. This is not just some technique. It is an art that has no clear rules. If you study it, your hands will become so strong that even a sword and thread cannot damage them. The main thing in mastering the sword is the thread that controls the thunder. This is why the bunresu technique is needed. If you reach level 6 of this technique, you can learn to play the negyam. If you start playing on it without achieving these results, you can lose your fingers. The boy immediately noticed that while the old man was playing the negyam, the sleeves of the master's robe, hanging from his arms, were completely cut by the strings. The boy asked if he really needed to learn this technique first before playing the instrument, and then he asked a question about how long it would take to get level 6. The master said that the main thing is patience, and he added that the student would need to sew up the master's clothes very carefully. After which he answered the boy that it would take about 10 years to master the instrument. The angry boy said that then he shouldn't have been pulled at all for the sake of this nonsense, and, moreover, distracted him from studying the Nirunsimbab technique. It turns out that at first the master gave his student hope, saying that he would teach him how to play the negyam, and in the end, he would also now sew up clothes. The master assured the student that he would really teach him, but also noted that all this does not happen so quickly. Considering that the boy doesn't even know sheet music, he's also complaining. Therefore, you need to learn to play something easier, for example, the kayagayam. The master also added that he sees the boy's readiness to study martial arts. In this regard, tomorrow they will begin by exploring the base. The boy was surprised. It seemed to him that he already knew the base. What then did the old man teach him all this time? The master replied that everything that happened before was simply a necessity for survival in order to prepare the body for more difficult tests. And in general, it's strange that a student asks such questions, because everything is already extremely clear. At the end, the master told the student to come to the backyard tomorrow after finishing all the housework. The next day, the student, standing in the backyard in front of the master, doubted and asked him if he was sure that this lesson would be in martial arts.